Welcome to another edition of In the Spotlight, brought to you by Crimson Cloak Publishing, the earth-friendly publisher with books for both adults and children in a wide variety of genres, available in paperback and hardcover, as ebooks, and with some audiobooks as well. In the Spotlight is a wide-ranging weekly interview show with authors, entrepreneurs, professionals, and other experts. Your host is Cynthia McGregor. Opinions and views expressed by the guests or hosts on this show do not necessarily reflect the opinions and views of the creator, Crimson Cloak Radio, the network, the hosts, or sponsors. And now, here's Cynthia.
Thank you, Carly McCracken, and welcome everybody to another edition of In the Spotlight. My guests this week are Reverend Misty Tyme and Audrey Balzart. I think it's going to be a particularly interesting show, so let's get right to it. My first guest is Reverend Misty Tyme, and Reverend Misty is a forgiveness expert, an author, a speaker, a death doula, and the creator of the forgiveness algorithm, which is a trademark. Her mission is clear: to bring a forgiveness tool to a cynical world that is craving a way to let go of pain and anger. Armed with the motto that forgiveness is the link between love and healing, she believes that when we practice forgiveness, we make room for the good life God has intended for each one of us. With a gift for opening hearts through her humorous and touching stories, Reverend Misty is known for uplifting and enlightening audiences across the U.S. through her talks and her workshops. Welcome, Reverend Misty.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Reverend Misty tells me that all major religions and societies agree we should forgive, we should let it go. The problem is no one tells us how. She wrote the how and put it into a step-by-step process to help you let it go. She helps people shift expectations of others or even themselves so they can let it go. Learning from past experiences so they can have healthy boundaries and happier relationships. She's the author of the book, The Forgiveness Solution, the step-by-step process to let it go. And on October 1st, she's releasing 2 online classes, How to Forgive Your Ex and How to Forgive Your Family. On Facebook, she's Reverend, that's R-E-V. Misty Tyme, that's T-Y-M-E. And on Instagram, she's Rev_Misty. Now that we've got all that out of the way.
Yeah, you have it all down. That's perfect.
Thank you. Now, are you ready to answer some questions?
Absolutely. Let's get to it.
Let's talk about what forgiveness is and what it is not.
Oh, isn't that the big question? I think that's one of the reasons we don't know how to forgive, because there's so many myths and misconceptions of forgiveness. And, my favorite misconception is that we're supposed to forgive and forget. And last time I checked, people and elephants, we just don't forget very well. And that's a good thing, because if you want to heal, it's important you understand what happened and not forget about it. Also, so you don't step right back in it again, right? It'd be like a lion in the jungle, right? If you keep walking back into the lion expecting not to get bit, you're going to get surprised every time. But you need to learn from those past experiences. So that's really a lot about one of my favorite myths and misconceptions. Also, forgiveness really is a gift you give yourself. It really happens in your heart and mind only. It's about separating from the pain and adjusting your expectations of the situation or the person. And also, it's really helping you just understand the why, like what happened, what am I learning from this? And it's important to know what it's not. Are you ready for some what it's not?
Yeah, ready for what it's not.
Okay, it's not letting a person out of legal justice or social consequences. So let the legal system handle a situation if that's what it needs to be, but also social consequences. And I get this a lot that you're supposed to forgive and forget, turn the other cheek, and have them over for Sunday dinner. No, you can still forgive and just not have them over for dinner. I say kind of like love with a 10-foot pole, and keep them on their side, their path, and know the situation. So that's forgiveness is not forgetting. It's also not letting a person out of justice or social consequences. It also doesn't mean that you have to say what happened was okay. I get that all the time, that people are like, if I forgive them, they're just going to do it again. And then that's letting them think that it's fine. And it's not. It's also, it's a hard thing to do. It's not weakness. It's one of the hardest things to do, is to truly forgive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm relating this to myself as you're talking. I had a situation in my childhood with a relative who was inappropriate with me, and I'm listening to you, and I'm trying to think. I mean, he's quite dead now, but how do I forgive him for what he did?
Right. Well, this is, I get this a lot, and I actually went through this in my own forgiveness journey, was expectations. And when you can reframe or shift expectations, this is perfect, because you realize it's really actually not too much about you. It's about them, their journey, whether it was something horrible they did or how they act. It is truly about them. So when I realized that my twin brother, and this is how I got led into this journey, he was a rageaholic and he was an alcoholic. He was extremely abusive, and so was my growing up life. And he turned into that person. And then he took his own life. And when he took his own life, I used to think, I will not be sad. I will be fine with it. If when he dies, it's going to be fine because we're not close. But ultimately, I kept having this expectation that he would apologize, he would change, and he would be the person he said he was supposed to be to me. Right? And we do that a lot, and they're valid expectations. Just like you, I am sure you had expectation of that person being not abusive, right?
Yeah.
Totally perfect expectation. And when people don't live up to our expectations, that's when we pick up unforgiveness. And it's totally normal. We all do it. It's just how we're wired. It's very few people in the world. I think I've never met anyone who, if somebody hurts them, that they don't feel hurt, right? Both physically and emotionally. So unforgiveness is anger, pain, sadness, and my very favorite, smoldering resentment. It's really common with families or love relationships. But we pick that up because of something that didn't go the way we expected it to. Now, first you have to ask yourself, was my expectation appropriate? Sure. In your case and in my case, it was totally appropriate. But some people don't have the will or the skill to meet our expectations. And let me say that one more time because it's super, super important. Some people don't have the will, and some people don't have the skill to meet our expectations. And what I mean by that is some people just don't want to. They said, nope, I'm not up for it, I'm out, or they don't care about our expectations or even our boundaries. And some people don't have the skill, which means they just don't know how. And that could be due to many different situations. It could be an addiction. It could be a mental health situation. It could be an upbringing that didn't teach them how, right? So lots of people start out with the will, very common in love relationships, very common with your parents even. Like I had a biological father that left, and you get so hurt as a child because you feel abandoned. But ultimately, I know for a fact he had the will at the beginning, but he didn't have the skill. He was a rageaholic, and he had alcohol addiction and a whole bunch of other stuff. I've also discovered that his upbringing was not great. So ultimately, he didn't have the will, he didn't have the skill, so he lost his will. And lots of people in relationships, that's probably the most common. People start out saying, yes, I want to be your friend. Yes, I want to be your parent. Yes, I want to be a great sibling to you, or a husband or a spouse. And they realize as time goes on, they actually just don't have the skill due to many different reasons. So I'm going to ask you to think about the person that you suggested and ask yourself, did they have the will to meet your expectation? Did they have the skill to meet your expectation?
Damned if I know.
Right, exactly. But ultimately, you can figure out from the situation that it was they chose to do what it was that they chose to do. And your expectation was that they wouldn't hurt you, and that's an appropriate expectation. But they had a whole different view of it, and they didn't want to, or their own mental health issues, addictions, history, all of that, their spiritual battles, all of that didn't have them be able to live up to that very appropriate expectation. And usually with forgiveness, I will tell you, once you shift that, and it really turns it into about them and not about us, especially if we can look at our expectation. And Cynthia, I happen to know yours is perfectly normal and a great expectation that people treat you well and don't abuse you. And they weren't able to live up to that. And this is the other part about forgiveness, is we act like once we forgive, we'll never be sad about it again or angry. And that's not true, because if you think about it, if you think about the situation, it hurts your heart and you're sad. But what you can now do is also add to that piece. That person didn't have the skill to meet my expectation. That person plain old didn't want to. It was really about their bad behavior and really had nothing to do with me. And so sometimes it can really shift a person in their healing process.
Well, the next question that comes to mind is, why forgive the person? What's the point, and what's in it for me?
Oh, that's the best part, because first of all, it's your choice. You don't have to. And people will say, well, you have to forgive. And guess what? You don't. You can hold on to that anger and that pain that it was caused and not do that work, that little bit of work we just talked about, because you just don't have to. But why forgive? Have you ever heard the statement, if expecting other people to treat you well and then not forgive them is having you drink the poison but expecting them to die, right?
Yeah.
Because ultimately we run things between our hearts and our heads. It's like only 17 inches apart. So we like to run the story back and forth and kind of try to change it and do all that. Forgiveness doesn't solve a problem. It identifies a problem. It makes you understand that you are bouncing it between your head and your heart. You're trying to change your yesterday, which we all do. We all want to go, well, if this would have happened and that would have happened. And we try to fix the problem because our heart hurts and our brains try to logically help us out. But if you forgive, you stop doing that. You literally say, that happened. It was horrible. It was sad. This person didn't have the will or the skill to meet my expectation. And now I have more information than I did before. It helps you answer the why, even though sometimes the why is almost impossible to answer. But then you no longer have to bounce it between your head and your heart so much anymore. And you can start letting go of the anger and the pain by learning from the experience and reacting that way, like from a place of lots of education. You got it. You understand it. You know you can't fix it, but you can choose better from this point on. And so that's really why we forgive. It helps us with boundaries. It helps us feel better. It helps us literally let go of the person and what they did as their actions and learn from it. Next time we see something like that, we won't step into that situation, or we can adjust how we react.
Well, actually, in my case, there wouldn't be that situation again to step into. He's quite dead for a long time now, and he's not going to bother me anymore, except in my head.
Right. And that's the part, because gosh forbid, then that means he's still causing problems. So we want to get that out of your head, out of your heart, and quote, let it go. And, or think about it much less. Sometimes forgiveness takes time. It takes us asking these questions over and over, like, what was wrong with this person? Why did they choose to do this? And understanding that, again, it's about them and not about you, and that you can learn from it. And when I mean learn from it, not step back into it again, is if you ran into a similar person, you would now go, hold it, I recognize these behaviors, and this is not a safe situation for me. And you can adjust and pivot that way. And as we get older, we kind of naturally do that. We're like, oh, we remember that. But there are some people that hold on to people who are still living and cause them drama and keep waiting for them to change, because what they really want is to be told that they're right and they want an apology. And guess what? They probably deserve that apology, and they are right. But it's forgiveness is no longer trying to control a person or a situation, which I know, and I'm going to pick on us women because we do this a lot with family members. We're kind of that, like, we like to herd people together and make things all right and take care of that. And if they just did this or did that, everything would be fine. But ultimately, when you let a person go, you let them be who they are. And again, it doesn't let them out of legal consequences. So if someone is dangerous, then you do go ahead and do what you need to do regarding that. Make sure that you have restraining orders and legal piece involved. But also forgiveness lets you let them go and take care of the social consequences. Though that wonderful word that we kind of grown up with now is boundaries. It lets you have boundaries. So that person isn't safe to be around, whether they're verbally, physically, or sexually abusive. They can't be around if they have an addiction and that kind of stuff, because you can't control that. That's for them to take care of. You can do as much as you can do. And so that's why forgiveness is so important to us. It's an actual tool we can use to have a happier, healthier life.
Now, you've got something called a forgiveness algorithm. What
Yes.
is that, and how does it help people to choose forgiveness?
Well, I don't know about you, but I love it when I have a process I could follow. Go here, do that, do this, do that. It helps me without having to reinvent the wheel, right? And a forgiveness algorithm, first let me explain what an algorithm is. An algorithm is just a step-by-step process to solve a problem. The forgiveness algorithm is a step-by-step process to help you let it go. And the fact that it helps you walk through this, examine things. I give you different tools you can use, because remember we talked about unforgiveness, right? And that we pick it up, and in relationships we usually pick up little pieces of unforgiveness over time. And many times it could take time to put that down. For example, in abuse situations, it's important to get therapy. I even talk about life coaches. I talk about banging a drum. All these different things to help heal your heart. And I talk about prayer and ceremony, all these different things you can actually physically do, because there is definitely a connection between our physical and our mental. It kind of solidifies our decision-making process. And then also writing the story down as part of my forgiveness algorithm. And, when we write things down, we see it just a little bit different than when we're bouncing it between our head and our heart, like I mentioned earlier.
Well, how long, if somebody goes through your forgiveness algorithm, how long does it take them to forgive going through your algorithm?
Well, it's all depends on the person and the situation. Each of us have different skills, so some of us are able to move things through things faster than others. But what I do promise you that if you learn those skills, if you hadn't had them before and you learn them, it'll be easier and easier as you go. I always say it's easier to forgive someone who stole my parking space versus if somebody hurt my children, right? So that's also a big piece of it. But the more you learn to forgive, even the person who stole your parking space, it'll be easier to forgive and understand the process as you get into bigger life issues.
In your book, Misty, you talk about fabulous forgivers. Who or what are
Yes.
fabulous forgivers?
A fabulous forgiver is that person that you can't even imagine things they've forgiven. Whether it's their children being murdered, they've been able to forgive the murderer through something like restorative justice. And then people who've been really abused and in their childhood and then have this amazing grown-up life, and you're like, how are you able to move past that unbelievably terrible abuse and have such an outlook on life? Those are people who have that use forgiveness to help them, and they are super fabulous to a level that you can't even imagine.
What do you think is the hardest part of forgiveness?
Well, there's a couple of them, but I would definitely say forgiving ourselves. I don't know about you, but I know that I've made a few mistakes in my life. How about you? Do you make a few mistakes in your life?
Oh yeah, sure, but I've forgiven myself for them. I'm not hard on myself in that respect.
Well, it depends on the situation and the person, but I can guarantee you that I hear about forgiving ourselves the most. It's one of the hardest things to do, but there's a great quote that called, "You want to perform a miracle? Forgive yourself."
What can we do to help ourselves with self-forgiveness if we haven't forgiven ourselves already?
Well, people and life is kind of messy. I say people are peoply and life is messy because we all make mistakes. So if understand that when people want to do better and be better, we forgive them much easier. We do it from our government to our celebrities to our family members. So do that for yourself. Give yourself some grace. Did you learn a lesson from your experience? Are you ever planning to repeat that thing that hurt so many or hurt yourself? And if you say no, then forgive yourself because you've learned so much. You know so much more now than you ever did.
And the name of your book is The Forgiveness Algorithm, a step-by-step guide to let it go. And it's available on Amazon, on sacredstories.com, or on your website, revmisty.com, right?
Yes, absolutely. Please jump on any of those and get it.
Now, do you have a story to share with us?
We talked about a piece of my book, and since we focus so much on expectations, let me talk to you about that because I think that's where we set ourselves up, and it's perfectly normal. So, how much do you want? Do you want me to get it from the book, or would you like me to tell you something personal story?
Well, I'd like both if there's time. We have 7 minutes left. So.
7 minutes. Okay, gosh, I can do a lot in 7 minutes. So let me get to this point because I think it's super, super important. I'm going to start with a story. So when you get married, I've been married a couple times actually. I'm on my third marriage and very happy and thrilled. But when I first got married to my first husband, we were young, and I'd come from a really rough background, and alcoholic parents and abusive, that whole piece. And I wanted out, so I married him for a couple reasons. First of all, it got me the heck out of Dodge. Two, I was pregnant, and I was like, "Oh, well, this is what I've got to do." And I never, ever, ever had premarital counseling or anything. For me, it was a way out. And I had an expectation of my husband to be everything that I hadn't had in my life before. And obviously that didn't work out so well. He was also young. And we weren't horrible to each other, but we sure enough didn't have love. And in the end of the 11 years and 3 kids later, he didn't live up to my expectations. But the problem was I had never even mentioned to him expectations, right? More than the average. I need you to take the trash out. I want you to help me with this, diapers, that whole piece. And the fact is, he couldn't meet my expectations because I had never even said them out loud in a healthy way. In turn, when we did divorce, it was ugly and it was really a rough divorce because I didn't take ownership for any of my part. It was all his part. So when you're trying to forgive an ex, you need to look at your own stuff and understand that you were trying to have somebody else heal you by your expectations. And some of my expectations were totally appropriate. Some of mine were not. And when your expectations haven't been fulfilled, we tend to act out really not very well. And sure enough, I, could blame him for everything, and it put our kids right in the middle, causing repetitive pain and generational pain. And we've all heard about stuff being passed down. And sure enough, it set people up for bad relationships because I wasn't taught the skills. So in that, I'm forgiving him because I realize he didn't have the skills. He started out with the will, but he didn't have the skill, and he lost his will, and so did I. So I'm able to forgive myself by gaining some of those skills back, by having therapy and understanding that my actions hurt others, apologizing, a good apology, because we all know a bad apology has a but in it, and not only apologize for your stuff, for what you did, and then make amends. So I had to make amends to my children. I had to say, I made a mistake here. I am not going to repeat this. And over time, people learn to trust you again because forgiveness is not trust. And I'm teaching them the skills to have better relationships. So I would ask your audience to look at all of their love relationships, their friend relationships, and ask themselves, have they ask the other person, can you meet my expectations here? These are what they are. And the other person will either say yes or no. And do they have the skills to meet your expectations? If you're going to ask somebody who is an alcoholic to meet your expectation, well, I have to tell you, they're not going to be able to do it because they have other issues that they're dealing with. So in all my experiences, both my 2 ex-husbands and my brother killing himself and my family situation, I have learned such beautiful nuggets that I love to share. And it's usually about expectations.
I'm listening to you and I'm thinking about how I went wrong in my marriage. But this is not about me. This is about you. And we have only 1 minute left. So you want to give us about 1 minute's worth of final wisdom?
My final wisdom is to really remember that forgiveness is not forgetting. It's about learning from your past experiences, seeing people who they really, really are, and ask yourself, do they have the will or the skill to meet my expectation in this relationship? And forgive yourself. Learn from your past experiences. If it wasn't a good thing that you did, apologize for your part and don't repeat it. And forgive yourself. You are human. You are a spiritual being having a human being experience, as we've heard before. And love yourself because you truly are loved.
Thank you very much, Reverend Misty Tyme.
Thank you.
And before I bring on our next guest, we need to take a quick commercial break. Remember that In the Spotlight is brought to you by Crimson Cloak Publishing for a wide variety of books, fiction, nonfiction, children's, adults, everything except erotic romance. featuring this week a book of women's fiction titled Full of Grace. The author is Elizabeth Crockett. The book can be bought on Crimson Cloak Publishing or on Elizabeth Crockett's Amazon page. That's Crockett with one T at the end. And let me tell you a bit about the book. It says cynical romance author Angela begins writing about Grace, a protagonist who has been diagnosed with cancer after her husband cheated on her. Again, Angela wonders if either her own messy relationship or Grace's challenging marriage will find a happily ever after ending. And now it's time for me to bring on my next guest, so hang on while I try to get a hold of Audrey Balzart. Hold on. Let me get a hold of Audrey on her landline and find out why she's not answering on Skype. Hold on. Ringing Audrey. Ringing Audrey. Ringing you on Skype and you're not answering. I'm ringing you again now. I'm getting Audrey isn't online. Folks, hang on. I'm contacting Audrey on her landline to find out why her Skype isn't connecting. Stay with us. She's going to be a great guest as soon as we get her online. Don't turn off your podcast. Here we go again. It's still giving me a not online signal. Sure, try to call me. Sin.MacGregor. Sin, C-Y-N, dot M-A-C-G-R-E-G-O-R. Stay with us, folks. Don't touch that dial, as they used to say in the old days of radio. Audrey is trying to contact me. Okay, I think I hear you. Audrey?
Hold on just a second.
Okay, let's hang up the landline.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Awesome.
Okay. Folks, I don't know what the problem was, but we've got it together now. And Audrey Balzart is a military retiree and disabled veteran who found her calling as a writer when starting her second life. With a love for all forms of storytelling, she earned her BA in 2017 from Nevada State College in Visual Media, Digital Cinema. With several short stories published, she's currently editing her first novel in her YA sci-fi A.J. Silver Misadventure series, as well as working on 3 romantic screenplays. but she's here today to talk about the Henderson Writers Group. So tell us first, Audrey, what in the world is the Henderson Writers Group?
So, the Henderson Writers Group, it's a 501c C3. I say that wrong every time. It's a non-profit organization, and our goal is to educate writers of all levels in all things writing related.
And where is it located?
So we're Henderson, although we're called the Henderson Writers Group, we're located in Las Vegas and Henderson, in all of the Vegas Valley.
And is it an in-person group, or can one join from a distance?
For our group meetings, you have to be in person, but we have members from all over the world, pretty much, that will join our group. Our main goal, though, is to provide reading critique. We're a critique group, so mostly we help people who come to our meetings, and we have meetings 3 times a week. I should say 2.5 times a week. We meet every Monday at the Community Lutheran Church on East Tropicana, and we have a critique group there. We meet every Monday except for holidays, and we meet there at 6:30, and we do critiquing. We do reading for 10 minutes and critiquing for 5 minutes for people who read. And then we meet also on Wednesdays from 2 to 4 at the Public Works Coffee Shop, which is in Henderson. And that's an afternoon group for people who can't make it to evening groups for one reason or another. And then we also have a Wednesday evening group that meets at Skinny Dugan's on West Charleston. And twice a month they meet there for reading critique. But once a month we have our board meeting there. And once a month we have a book club there.
And how much does it cost to be a member?
So people who want to become members, they pay $50 for a whole year. And that goes from whenever you start being a member that month, your membership starts, and it goes all the way to the next year the same month.
And how did you find out about the Henderson Writers Group?
I actually found out about the Henderson Writers Group by chance when I was preparing to write for the first time. I had actually seen an article in the Review Journal about a group called the Wednesday Warriors, which was a group of former military people who were writing that got together, and they were conducting classes at the Clark County Library, and I had saved that information for when I was ready to go get help for my writing. But when I actually showed up at the Clark County Library for the classes that were being given, they were at that time being given by the Henderson Writers Group. So that's how I came to know them.
And other than preferably living in the Las Vegas area so you can participate in person, what are the qualifications, if any, to join?
There are no real qualifications to join except that you want to better your writing, or if you're ready to go to publication and you want to find out more information on how to get published, then we can provide help on all of that.
Now you've got an anthology. Tell us about that.
So we put out an annual anthology. It is about 20 stories per book, and we take submissions from our members, and we send them out for judging from other people outside of our group. And the judges, our current judges, are in Utah. They're a writers group in Utah. And we take stories that are fiction, nonfiction. They could be poems, and they can just be teasers from novels. But it's up to 4,000 words per submission, and they're sent out to judges. Last year we had 40 submissions, and once we get all of the scores back, then we establish a cutoff, and from there we publish the top scoring stories.
And do the writers who make it into the anthology get any remuneration?
What they get is a publication right, because often it's people who haven't been published before. So they get the publication right, and they get a free copy of the book. And they get scores and comments back from the judges that even people who don't make it into the anthologies get that valuable information back on how people perceive their stories, which can help them even if they don't get published in the anthology. And less than half the people who submitted were actually published in the anthology.
And where can people purchase the anthology if they're interested in buying a copy?
All of our anthologies are available on Amazon.
Under what title?
I think if they do a search under Henderson Writers Group Anthology, they should be able to find them.
Now, what do you write, Audrey, when you're not heading up the Henderson Writers Group or editing the anthology?
So I generally, in my writing, write young adult sci-fi. It doesn't always have to be young adult. My short stories are actually sci-fi that is created in the world of my young adult stories. My series that I'm writing is a 5-book young adult series, and the first book is in its final edit. It's called The Gift of Ancestors. But my short stories that I write are from this world I've created. They're like on different planets and stuff, but they explain a lot of the backstory through short stories. And then also I am a filmmaker. As you said, I graduated from Nevada State College, and I have scripts that I'm also writing, and for some reason they tend to come out to be romantic stories, even though I'm really an action adventure and sci-fi person. So I don't know why I get drawn into romance scripts, but and then I do film editing for people who are looking for editors, and I also participate in the 48-hour film project, which we have one coming up in August, and so that's where you write, shoot, edit, and submit a film within 48 hours. It's a 4 to 7 minute film. And so the Las Vegas one is coming up August 23rd to 25th. And that keeps me busy.
You sound like a very busy woman. You earned your BA in Visual Media Digital Cinema. What is digital cinema?
So digital cinema means that most of it is done electronically now. I didn't learn how to handle the actual film in filming. It's all done digitally now, which makes it go a bit faster since you don't have to send out film to be processed or anything.
How many years have you been writing now?
I started writing other than when I was 14 and I wrote a book, and then I was just an avid reader back then, and at some point I thought, why don't they write the book I want to read? So I wrote a time travel novel just because that was what I wanted to read. But then I let it go, and I started writing again in 2006 after I had retired. And that's when I started creating the world for my sci-fi series.
2006. What's it like serving as the president of a large dynamic writers group like the Henderson Writers Group?
It's really good. I found that since I have been attending the Henderson Writers Group since 2008, and all the people who shared their experiences and writing lessons with me, I feel like this is a great opportunity to give back as the president. And in the past, I was a conference coordinator, and I was the secretary for a while. And this year, they needed someone to step up as president. So it's just my way of giving back and paying it forward to the new writers that are coming in. Because writing can be a lonely craft for writers. You're getting things out of your head onto your computer. And the Henderson Writers Group, I feel like they provide a good environment for writers that are like-minded to get together and just become a community.
And if you've been a member of any other writers groups, how does the Henderson Writers Group compare with these others?
Well, I in the past I have been a member of the Las Vegas Writers Group, and I know you can be members of multiple groups at the same time. I know that the Henderson Writers Group, they just meet once a month, and it's usually to provide a speaker to give encouragement to the writing community. But ours is totally different in that we provide multiple meetings during the week to give actual reading and critiquing. At our meetings, you don't have to be a member to participate in our meetings. They're all open to the public. So even if you're just interested in us, you can come and sit in on our meetings and hear the feedback. You can offer feedback on what you hear, but you have to be a member to read for critique. So I think that is one of the biggest differences for us.
Now, if anyone listening to this program would like to start a writers group, they're not in one and they don't know of one nearby, or maybe they were part of it and didn't find it satisfactory to them, what advice would you give them about how to start a writers group?
I think starting a writers group can be pretty simple because you can go on to places like Meetup or Facebook and just find a few writers that are willing to become a group, find a meeting place. The problem is that people don't always get along with each other.
Yeah.
And sometimes critiques are given on the people and not on their writing. And the Henderson Writers Group has a no blood on the floor concept where we never critique the people who are reading, because we know people come from all levels of writing and all levels of society, and we only ever help them with their writing. We never try to judge them as people.
How would you suggest that somebody starting a writers group keep the new members from jumping down each other's throats?
I think you have to state up front that this is why we're coming together, and if we can't make it work, then they need to find another group. And there will be some people that you get along with better than others. So there are a lot of small writing groups in the community. You can find other ones, especially through Meetup or on Facebook. You can do searches and find them. But here in the Vegas Valley, if you can't find some other people that you get along with, you can come join us and we will welcome you.
How many people, active members, do you have at this time?
We just reconciled our membership, and I have not seen a final count, but we usually fluctuate between like 80 and 150. Our membership tends to increase the closer we get to the Las Vegas Writers Conference, which is next year. It's in April. This year it was in May. So we host the Las Vegas Writers Conference, and because we offer a discount to members for the conference, we tend to get more people joining as we get closer to the conference.
Now, you're ex-military. What branch
Yes.
of the service were you in?
I was in the Air Force for 20 years.
20 years. And you're a disabled vet. Does that mean that you saw combat? Were you wounded in combat?
I was not. But fortunately in the military, they give you complete medicals when you first join and complete medicals when you're leaving. And if there's any difference, then they will, they can make disabilities based on any changes in your body that came about.
Great. Well, now getting back to the writers group, Audrey, do you have any stories to share with us? Either heartwarming story or a funny story or one of each? Do you have a story or two to share with us?
Oh, a story. Wasn't expecting that.
Well, shame on Ned for not warning you. It was in the Q&A thing that I sent him.
Oh, let's see. Not really. I mean, I feel like every time I go to the writers group, there's always some kind of story to talk about, but they're always small.
Well, then, do you have any of your writing that you'd care to share with us? That was in the form that I sent Ned too.
I didn't see that form. Oh, I had other things prepared to talk about.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Let me just tell you a little bit more about our group, because we have educational programs that we conduct. Once a month, we have guest speakers come to our Monday night meetings and share their experiences, either writing-wise or promotion-wise. Could be marketing. It could be world building. It could be on point of view or anything like that. So we have speakers that come in at least once a month, and then if we have a fifth Wednesday of the month, we always have a special program at our Skinny Dugan's location, and tomorrow night is a fifth Wednesday, so actually we're going to have Ned Barnett giving tips on marketing that you probably haven't heard before. So that will be 6:30 to 8:30 tomorrow at Skinny Dugan's, and once again, those are all open to the public. So we also have a monthly Dime Grinds, which is a reading event for writers. We usually have like one Henderson Writers Group writer and two other writers from the community, and they read some of their works and have their books ready for sale. We're in the process of finding a new location for that because the coffee shop we've been working with is closing down. But that's usually the first Sunday of every month. And the coffee shop usually offers 10-cent coffee during the readings. Really? And it helps bring people together with other writers in the community. So, what else can I tell you? We have a monthly book club.
You've got about 5 minutes, so...
Okay. I can talk for that long. We offer a book club once a month at Skinny Dugan's. Sometimes the books are writing related, and sometimes they're just literary books.
Are most of your members fictioneers or nonfiction writers, or some of each, or how does it go?
Our members are a very diverse group. We have people who write everything. We have people who write memoirs. We have people who write regular fiction. We have a lot of sci-fi writers. We have some children's book writers. And we have several nonfiction writers who just write about whatever it is that their jobs are about. So there's no set thing. We have every kind. We accept, or it could be essay writers. It could be magazine article writers. We accept everybody, and we have everybody in our group.
And they're at all levels of expertise, I take it, from
that's correct.
To never published, yeah?
That's correct. We have people who have been accepted into the big publishing houses, and we have people who are just beginning and don't even know what they want to write yet.
And some who are self-published, I assume?
Yes, we have many who are self-published. It seems to be the way to go these days if you want to make any kind of money on your books.
I'm still doing it the traditional way with my books, but I'm with boutique publishers now rather than with the majors. I find I'm much happier. The owner and sponsor of this show is Crimson Cloak Publishing, and they are one of my publishers, and they are a boutique. And Acute by Design is another of my publishers, and they are a boutique. And I'm much happier with the boutiques than I was when I was with the majors.
Yes, I hear that a lot. And at the Las Vegas Writers Conference, we invite publishers and agents for people to pitch to, and a lot of times we bring in the boutique publishers because they are the best thing that people can do right now.
Yes, I've been published by a number of other boutiques. I can't think of their names right now, but there were 3 or 4 other boutiques who had 1 or 2 of my books each, and it really is the way to go if you're not self-publishing.
And then if there's one more thing I'd like to let you know about, and that's that we have a student scholarship for local high school seniors, and that will be coming up when the school year starts. We will be contacting the schools so that if they have a high school senior that is a really good writer, they can submit for scholarships to us, and that will be determined. We will announce the winners at the Las Vegas Writers Conference and invite them to a day at the Writers Conference as part of their winnings.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Audrey Balzart. I appreciate your being on the show with us today. And the Henderson Writers Group certainly sounds like a wonderful endeavor. You've been listening to In the Spotlight, a weekly show brought to you by Crimson Cloak Publishing for a wide variety of books, fiction and nonfiction, for children and for adults, featuring this week Full of Grace by Elizabeth Crockett. And we invite you to join us again next week at the same time. And remember, pass a smile along. This is Cynthia McGregor. I'll see you next week.
You have been listening to In the Spotlight with your host, Cynthia McGregor, brought to you by Crimson Cloak Publishing. For a wide variety of books for both adults and children in print, ebook, and audio formats, join us every Tuesday at the same time as In the Spotlight brings you interesting guests to entertain and enlighten you. I'm Carly McCracken. On behalf of Crimson Cloak Publishing, thank you for joining us, and we hope you'll join us again next week.